The Grand Canyon. How could words ever do it justice? How do you describe a mile-high universe of stone? The geologic record of the planet Earth from its molten beginnings 2 billion years ago. Man is a creature of horizons. The Grand Canyon is a world tipped vertical. Its size numbs the mind. Its beauty is overwhelming, almost paralyzing. Look as far as you can see. 10 miles, 20. What you see is only a fraction of the Grand Canyon's immense length. 270 miles of towering cliffs, staggering beauty. A beauty that is timeless, whether you visit in the spring, summer, fall, or winter. The Grand Canyon is a marvel in a land of wonders. The American Southwest is a land of incredible beauty. For over 60 years, Arizona Highways magazine has captured and chronicled that beauty, the excitement of its living history, the art and folklore, the culture, the fabric of this majestic land. Over the years, Arizona Highways has grown to be one of the world's most honored and respected journals. This hour is presented by Arizona Highways magazine. For those of you who have visited the Grand Canyon, it's a reminder of one of the world's most thrilling spectacles. For those of you who have yet to stand on the rim, it's a hint of the breathless moment yet to come. For earthbound travelers, the approach gives no warning of the waiting spectacle. A mountain range can loom on the horizon for hours, a whole day. But the Grand Canyon below waits unseen. A sign is your only announcement. For most visitors to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, the first turnoff on the road to the village is Mather Point. It's your first opportunity to see the staggering grandeur of the canyon. No photograph, no description would prepare you for that first moment. The sheer size, the depth, the incredible beauty overwhelms the senses. First, amazement. Then, a flood of questions. How old is it? How did this canyon form? Questions which will be answered during one of the most memorable vacations of your life. Mather Point is just one of the many scenic viewpoints along the canyon's rim. Many of these scenic viewpoints along the Grand Canyon's south rim are connected by miles of walking trails, paved roads for automobiles and shuttle buses, and hiking trails for serious backpackers or casual strollers. The roads and trails are planned and maintained by the National Park Service. These dedicated rangers supervise thousands of acres that make up the Grand Canyon National Park. At the Visitor Center, you can get information and view exhibits showing the wildlife, plant life, and history of the canyon. And in the bookshop, you can find dozens of books and pamphlets on the canyon. When you reach the Visitor Center, you are in Grand Canyon Village. Nearby, you'll find the main visitor attractions on the canyon's south rim, including the canyon's celebrated mules. When you think of the Grand Canyon, you think not only of the vast beauty, but also the legendary mules. These strong, sure-footed animals have safely carried tourists up and down the sheer walls of the canyon since the 1800s. The mule wranglers range from grizzled old cowboys to pretty young cowgirls. These men and women do every day what most of us dream of doing once in a lifetime. Livery manager Ron Clayton is a man with a great sense of humor who knows the name and personality of each mule. But he stresses safety to the nervous riders who wonder what lies ahead.
Anytime that we stop these mules for one reason or the other, we like these mules to stop and face with their heads looking into the canyon. Folks, they got eyes on this end, no eyes on the other end. We want the end with the eyes on it closest to the edge.
There are always questions, and Clayton patiently answers each one.
If they give you a little switch, right in the butt. Can I be any more explicit than that? Right where Daddy did, just like Daddy did. Daddy didn't hit you in the head, did he? These mules are super gentle. I'm glad you asked that question. Folks, these mules are going because you want to go, not because they want to go. They've been there.
Stand right up. Stirrups. Beautiful. Some of these mules are just like people. They're all individuals. You put the bridle on, they want to put it on just right. You've got a couple of mules with a little foretop up there. You don't get that foretop underneath the headband up there, just like putting your hat on backwards. They know the difference. Kind of an amazing animal. This is a little repeat. She's been about 10 years old here, and she's one of our better mules. We put the little kids and the girls on this mule. Is that right, Piggy? You ready to go again today? One more time. She's been down here about 10,000 times.
The first turn of the trail is terrifying. A peak over the edge, and you wonder why you didn't back out when you had the chance. Then, slowly, your mind begins to accept this strange vertical world. And you realize the sage-old mule knows more about the trail than you do. And that's when you begin to look out instead of down. And you see the canyon from a new perspective. You're inside, not on the rim. You're no longer a bystander, but a part of this world of beauty. It's a world of light and shadows, of gem-like colors and quiet grandeur.
This is an area we call cinch up. This is where we stop and check out the mules, check out their stirrup length there, introduce yourself to the people and get their names also. We're right now at this area here is the Kaibab limestone. This particular area is over 200 million years old. This is the point of no return. We check the people out here to see if there's anybody terrified. And if they're terrified, this is as far as they go. Most people have to make 2 or 3 turns while they seem to get over their nervousness, and if they make it here, we're all set. From this point on, it's all downhill.
There will be changes in climate and scenery during the trip to the bottom. By the time you reach the river far below, you will have forgotten the cool winds at the rim. You'll wonder why you brought so many clothes. The Grand Canyon is not one climate, but in all 6. In fact, the whole of North America consists of 7 climatological zones. And 6 of these exist here in the canyon. Your ride from the rim down to the river will cover a descent of 1 mile along 11 miles of trail. It's the climatological equivalent to a ride from the cool plains of Canada to the sun-baked deserts of Mexico. In the winter, the rim of the canyon can be blanketed with snow, while down along the Colorado River, flowers bloom and cactus grow. Thunderstorms, which roll over the rim, provide rain in the upper reaches. But the rain usually evaporates before it gets to the dry desert climate of the canyon below. The temperature varies as much as 35 degrees from the rim down to the river. So the riders who left in a snowstorm can find themselves basking in temperatures near the 70s when they reach the bottom. Not only does the climate change, but the plant and animal life also changes. At the rim, thousands of feet above sea level, you'll find the cool, weathered trees of the Canadian forests, magnificent stands of Douglas fir, groves of quaking aspen, and thousands of stately ponderosa pine. A 1,000 or so feet down, you'll come upon the upper Sonoran Zone. Here, you'll see the first signs of desert life, including several varieties of cactus. Clinging to the steep cliffs is one of the most important trees in the canyon, the hardy pinyon pine. In the past, the canyon's Indian tribes considered the tasty pinyon nuts a staple part of their diet. In the lower Sonoran Zone, down closer to the river, you'll find native plants of the deserts of Mexico and the United States. The hedgehog cactus, prickly pear and cholla, one of the most brilliant desert flowers, the Indian paintbrush, or the cowboy's nightmare, the catclaw bush, so named because its needle-sharp thorns scratch like an angry cat. The rider is less likely to see the canyon's animal life. These creatures usually scamper out of the way of the lumbering mules and riders. Now and then, a lucky rider will spot a deer or fox. Like the plant life, many of the animals which inhabit the canyon live out their lives within their own climatological or life zone. Gray foxes and rock squirrels can be found in the upper Sonoran levels of the canyon. So can a variety of rodents, wood rats, chipmunks, and deer mice. Lower Sonoran offers a glimpse of true desert life. Well off the trail, you can even find an occasional rattlesnake. Some of the canyon's inhabitants are more adaptable. The mule deer, for example. It roams down to the river and up the opposite side with ease. Nimble goats and sheep wander the cliffs of the canyon, paying little attention to the climate or the sheer drop below. If you're lucky, you might catch a glimpse of a majestic bighorn sheep. Up on the plateau, vast herds of antelope still run the plains. Soaring ravens travel easily from rim to rim. This is the halfway spot on the trail, Indian Gardens. It's a spring-fed oasis shaded by tall cottonwood trees. This was once a favorite camp of the Havasu Indians, who have lived in the canyon for centuries. After lunch and a rest, half the riders turn and make the 6-mile return to the rim. That's the one-day ride. But for Chief Wrangler Jim Dennis and his group, half the adventure is still ahead. Now begins one of the most exciting portions of the trip. The Colorado River and Phantom Ranch lie ahead. But first, there's the job of negotiating Devil's Corkscrew. This is a series of sharp switchbacks leading down into the inner gorge. Many consider this the most frightening part of the ride. This narrow ribbon of path was blasted out by the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 1930s. On one side, the rider's shoulders nearly touch the canyon wall. On the outside, this sheer drop down to the Colorado River. Crossing the suspension bridge, 60 feet above the water, gives you your first opportunity to see the river up close. We're now approaching our destination. Just below is Phantom Ranch, one of the most unusual resorts in the world. After the long trip, you'll be quite ready to dismount and stretch your legs and begin enjoying the scenery. Phantom Ranch is a cluster of 11 stone and wood cabins, plus 4 dormitories and a rustic lodge, all built in 1922. In the 1920s, this resort served as an exclusive hideaway for the wealthy. Today, it's a retreat for everybody. For so remote a spot, the accommodations are quite comfortable. Guests are assigned to cabins, and meals are served here in the main dining room. Everything is served family style, and after the ride down, you'll have worked up a real appetite for the hearty country cooking. A mule train brings in the guests, and twice each day, strings of pack mules haul in the supplies. Everything used here at Phantom Ranch, from the food to the plates used for eating, comes down by pack train. For most guests, the most exciting part of the stay at Phantom Ranch is the chance to explore a place very few will ever be privileged to see. Bright Angel Creek is a special attraction. This is one of the most beautiful streams on Earth. Bright Angel Creek carries the runoff from springs and melting snow on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. This is the way most visitors see the Colorado River. From up here, it seems like a narrow, peaceful stream. This is the Colorado River. The thunder of the river is awesome. The Indians said when the river was angry, it would grumble. And the grumbling is the sound of house-sized boulders being rolled and tumbled against the bottom. The boulders and rocks, the sharp sands beat and pound and cut into the solid rock of the canyon. The Grand Canyon is still growing. Colorado begins its journey in the Wind River range of the Rocky Mountains. At its beginning, up in Wyoming, it's an inviting trout stream. Before it's finished, it would have traveled 1,400 miles. Along its way, it will be fed by hundreds of other streams, like this one. An area equal to about 1/7 of the United States drains into the Colorado. Electrical power supplied by these waters will light the lights of Las Vegas. The Colorado River will irrigate thousands of square miles of farmland. The western states owe their existence to the Colorado. California canals, Arizona canals, all drain water from the mighty Colorado. Land that began this century as desert has been turned into lush farmland. Before it finally ends in the Gulf of California, the Colorado River, 245,000 square miles of drainage, one of the mightiest river systems in the world, ends up as it began, barely a stream. To those who run the world's rivers, the Colorado is the Mount Everest of whitewater rafting. Despite the building of Glen Canyon Dam upstream, the portion that flows through the canyon is still regarded by many as one of the toughest challenges in the world. This is the way most people ride the rapids, in huge motor-driven pontoon boats piloted by professionals who know the location of every rock and hidden current. Concessionaires provide trips of various lengths. But for experienced rafters, oh, there's no thrill to match the challenge of riding the rapids in a small raft. The 277-mile section of the Colorado that flows through the Grand Canyon has more than 150 rapids like these. Several of them drop as much as 15 feet. There is one 30-foot drop. In some of the rapids, the currents are so strong they can tear off your clothing, shirt, belt, trousers, shoes, and whatever goes underneath. The Grand Canyon is a geological wonder. The Colorado River down there has cut through the entire geological history of the Earth. Nowhere in the world is the record of hundreds of millions of years so clearly revealed. It has the effect of turning just about every visitor into a geologist. And to help, the National Park Service has a staff of trained geologists to answer your questions and encourage youthful rockhounds. Since the layers of rock are so clearly exposed, understanding the Earth's geological history becomes easy, almost as easy as a walk through time. The black rock at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is magma from the very beginning of the planet Earth. 2 billion years ago, great volcanoes spewed this liquid rock across the Earth's surface. These layers were buckled into a towering mountain range. Rains, which cooled the young planet, eroded these mountains back to a level plain. Before life had appeared on Earth, a whole world had been born, had grown, and had died. A total geological cycle. 570 million years ago, this land sat on the edge of a large ocean. The remains of the Earth's earliest sea creatures built layers of limestone and left their fossil outlines in the stone. At times, the land would rise above sea level. The limestone layers would give way to mud, which turned to shale or to sand, which became the canyon's sandstone. In all, the land rose and subsided 17 times, giving the canyon 17 separate layers of limestones, sandstones, and shales. At the beginning of the modern era, these layers were much deeper than today. This land rose high above the seas, and erosion began to cut away the layers. 6 million years ago, only a tick or two on the geological clock, the young Colorado River began to cut into the rising plateau. The sharp gravels of the Colorado were no match for the soft limestones and sandstones. They chiseled and cut their way through 2 billion years of the planet's history. A mountain or two on today's horizon is a reminder of how deep these layers were. How the river did its job of carving is explained by National Park Service Ranger Carl Bowman.
For literally hundreds of millions of years, we had layer after layer after layer of rock forming here in northern Arizona. And yet today, we don't find any of these layers being formed. Instead, we find all of our old rock layers being destroyed, being carved up and carried away. So obviously, something has changed between then and now. And that change was the uplift of the Rocky Mountains. Because when the Rockies lifted up, this area began to rise up as well. Now here, our uplift was very smooth and gentle. You can see that our rock layers are all still nice and flat. But right in the center of northern Arizona, we did have a little bit of a dome shape, kind of like the top of my hat. And through that dome, about 6 million years ago, the Colorado River established its course and began to carve down, to cut a canyon. Now, of course, today, when you stand up here on the rim and you look down at those 2 little spots of water down there, the Colorado doesn't look like a very big stream from here. But actually, as it flows through the Grand Canyon, it averages about 300 feet across, and it runs about 30 feet deep. So it's a fair-sized river, but more than that, it's a very steep river. It's flowing very quickly through the Grand Canyon. It can carry a lot of sand and silt with it. Now, ordinary clear water wouldn't have been able to cut down through all of these rock layers like this. When you start dumping all that sand and rock in there, the water can use that material as an abrasive, and especially during floods, use it to grind its way down into the crust of the earth. And it works real well, The Grand Canyon is already a mile deep, but the river still has about another half-mile to go before it reaches sea level, so its carving job isn't finished.
The Grand Canyon's most beautiful features, the buttes and spires that visitors admire, were not carved by the waters of the Colorado River. Once the river had chosen its course, it cut straight down, leaving the job of decorations to other kinds of erosion, snow, rain, and wind. You don't have to be a geologist to enjoy the Grand Canyon. You don't even have to be interested in geology. But I'll guarantee you'll know a whole lot more about this Earth of ours after you visit this spectacular classroom. And you'll never have a better teacher than Mother Nature herself. Hiking the canyon trails or just standing on the rim, you're forced to wonder how many others have walked these paths. Scientists suspect that man lived in this area as early as 25,000 years ago. But the first real evidence of man in the canyon is this. It's a little figure made of willow twigs. It's 4,000 years old. Around 700 AD, a group of builders, probably related to today's Hopi Pueblos, built rock and clay structures on the plateau and on the faces of the sheer cliffs inside the canyon. They were known as the Anasazi, the Old Ones. The canyon's climate and life zones made life easy. On the rim, game was abundant. Below the 3,000-foot level, the weather was warm year-round. On level land, near springs and creeks, the Indians planted small gardens of squash, corn, or beans. You'll find the homes, the villages, and the irrigation systems of the Anasazi in and around the canyon. Most have fallen to ruin. What is left of this mysterious people is carefully protected by the Park Service. Mysterious because about 1150 AD, 4 centuries after they came to the canyon, these artist, builder, architects silently left. One tribe, the Havasu, settled in this lush, water-filled side canyon. The Havasu remain the only Indians who make their home down in the Grand Canyon. The reservation here in the Havasu Canyon is one of the smallest and certainly the most remote of any in the nation. The Havasupai call themselves Supai for short, and Supai is the name of their village. The tribe, numbering about 500, spends its life in this little box canyon beneath the canyon's towering cliffs. Havasupai means people of the blue-green water. The first glimpse of this Eden-like setting tells why they chose the name and why they chose this as their home. The answer to both is Havasu Creek. This picturesque, spring-fed stream emerges from the canyon floor near the village. Havasu Creek turns the land into a rich oasis with an abundance of plant life. The rich, blue-green coloration of Havasu Creek is caused by calcium compounds and other chemicals, but it's also a reflection of the sky against the white bottom. There are 4 of these magnificent waterfalls along Havasu Creek. The chemicals in the water produce filmy curtains of travertine that cling to every surface touched by the spray. As the water evaporates, the chemicals turn to stone, forming brilliant turquoise pools. The Havasupai are a bit camera shy, but they're friendly to visitors. In fact, the Supai's only contact with the outside world is from the tourists who come to visit their idyllic hideaway. It's a peaceful retreat. There is no television and no daily newspaper to establish a link with the rest of the world. But recent times have brought a few changes. This modern motel has been built beneath the tall cliffs to accommodate year-round visitors. It has a telephone so that tourists can call ahead for room reservations and arrange for horses. Those who have been here return frequently. To them, a trip to the Grand Canyon could never be complete without a visit to the Havasupai, the people of the blue-green water. The first Europeans to see the Grand Canyon were led here by Indian guides. Coronado was looking for the fabled 7 cities of gold. He heard stories of a great river. In 1540, Coronado sent Captain Garcia Lopez de Cardenas to investigate. The Spaniards came upon the canyon in the vicinity of Desert View. As impressive as the site was, Captain Cardenas stayed only 3 days. He sent back a report that his men were unable to find a crossing. The Spanish were gold seekers, not sightseers. It would be another 3 centuries before the United States would send an expedition to map the Colorado River. Lieutenant Joseph Ives of the U.S. Topographical Engineers led that first group, and he shared the earlier Spanish opinion. In his official report, he noted, "The region is of course altogether valueless. It seems intended by nature that the Colorado River along the greater portion of its lonely and majestic way shall be forever unvisited and undisturbed." Lieutenant Ives didn't know it, but he was about to arouse great interest in the canyon, not with his words, but in the sketches his expedition would bring back. 2 artists accompanied Ives. They saw great beauty. Their art would attract the attention of the eastern newspapers and begin building the reputation of the Grand Canyon as a spectacular tourist attraction. By the late 1800s, stagecoaches were bringing tourists to the Grand Canyon. But the trip from Flagstaff took 11 hours, and hotel facilities at the canyon were almost as uncomfortable as the stagecoach. At the turn of the century, the stagecoach days were numbered. The Santa Fe Railroad began laying track across Arizona. A spur was built from Williams to the Grand Canyon. And the first passenger train arrived September 18, 1901. Suddenly, one of the great wonders of the world was open to the mass public via the Grand Canyon Special. In 1909, the Santa Fe built the Grand Canyon Station, giving it a rustic character to blend with the stately forest of Ponderosa pine. With the hordes of new visitors came royalty and the rich and famous from all over the world. The Santa Fe added deluxe Pullman cars to accommodate them. And the first sight they saw was this magnificent structure, the El Tovar Hotel, billed as the world's largest log structure and certainly the most elegant. The El Tovar was promptly acclaimed as one of the great hotels of the world, her rich appointments exceeded only by the views. A glamorous new element was added with the arrival of Fred Harvey, a dashing young man from London, England, who had become a Chicago businessman. Fred Harvey took over all the Santa Fe hotels, including the El Tovar. He recruited the most refined young women he could find to go west, to work in his growing chain of hotels and restaurants. To be selected as a Harvey girl was a special honor, like being selected as a Ziegfeld girl on Broadway. The Harvey girls were hostesses to some of the most famous people in the world. Kings and presidents, blue bloods and potentates, all made reservations months in advance for the El Tovar. And quite a collection it was. Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, George Bernard Shaw, the French hero Marshal Foch, another president, Dwight Eisenhower, and Albert Einstein, a genius with a sense of humor. A few years later, Henry Ford introduced Americans to the automobile. The introduction would become a love affair, and the Tin Lizzie would soon replace the Grand Canyon Special. Millions of people began arriving by car, and later by air. By 1968, fewer than 200 persons came by rail, and train service was discontinued. Now the steel rails are rusty. These ponderosa saplings will soon be tall trees. The door to the once busy waiting room is cracked and peeling. Cobwebs cover the window panes. The whistle of the locomotive, the sounds of hissing steam are only a memory. But the Santa Fe station still stands, a reminder of a bygone era. Through it all, the old hotel up on the hill still presides over the South Rim, as elegant and as busy as ever. And the Harvey girls are still here, in a tradition kept alive over the years. These women still wear the black and white uniform that made them famous. Fred Harvey hired another woman, Mary Coulter. He was a pioneer, and so was she. Mary Coulter apprenticed as an architect in San Francisco. Because she was a woman, she couldn't take the state exams to become a licensed architect. So Fred Harvey put her to work as a designer, and she designed and built some of the most famous buildings in the early West. The Hopi House is a Mary Coulter building, one of her best known. She patterned the building after the Pueblo dwelling she found in the Southwest. Her Indian workmen felt so at home that they lived in the building while it was under construction. Today, guests might assume it was a well-preserved Indian dwelling. The building is part museum and part display for modern Indian crafts. Kachina dolls, pottery, and beautiful hand-woven rugs are for sale. The lookout shop is another Mary Coulter design. It's so skillfully constructed into the wall of the canyon that many visitors come upon it by accident. The long-awaited opening of Mary Coulter's watchtower in 1933 attracted nationwide attention. She had always been fascinated by ruins of Indian watchtowers in the Southwest. She spent years studying these ruins, and when her replica here on the South Rim was completed, it was exacting to the last detail. It stands a desert view, some 20 miles from the Grand Canyon village. It's the highest point on the south rim. From the top, you can see almost 100 miles of canyon. And in the other direction, you get a magnificent view of Arizona's San Francisco peaks. Millions of visitors from all over the world come to the Grand Canyon every year. Many of them arrive by air. The Grand Canyon Airport has become a busy hub of transportation. Several flights arrive and depart daily. For arriving passengers, it's only a short bus ride to the hotels at Grand Canyon Village. The airport is actually located in the town of Tusayan, just outside Grand Canyon National Park. Tusayan has a number of stores, several moderately priced hotels, and one of the most popular tourist attractions, the IMAX Theater, showing a special widescreen film on the Grand Canyon that is an experience in itself. Tusayan is also the location for heliports that give you a completely different perspective in viewing the canyon from the air. Regular helicopter tours of the canyon are scheduled several times daily. These tours give you a bird's eye view from above the canyon, including the Colorado River. The hub of activity on the south side is Grand Canyon Village. Here, in and around the village, you'll find all the National Park Service facilities, including the Visitors Center and the Yavapai Ranger Station. The backcountry office for hiking permits and the major hiking and mule trails. The South Kaibab Trail is just outside the village. The Bright Angel Trail, where the mules depart daily on their trips to Indian Gardens and Phantom Ranch, is in the heart of the village. Here you'll find the major hotels, including the Bright Angel Lodge. There are 2 moderately priced restaurants here. The El Tovar's restaurant with its Harvey Girl waitresses is elegant. The prices range from moderate to expensive. On the rim, next to the El Tovar, sits the newer Thunderbird Lodge. At the Maswick Lodge, amid the Ponderosa pines, deer frequently walk up to your cabin door. The village also contains a general store, campground, RV facilities, and one of the original canyon establishments, Verkamp's gift shop. The development of these tourist facilities has been carefully planned by the Fred Harvey Company and the National Park Service. These 2 organizations have worked together for years to make the canyon an enjoyable experience for visitors and still preserve the scenic wonder of this remarkable attraction. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt gazed across this vast expanse and issued an appeal which has been faithfully followed. The President said, "In the Grand Canyon, Arizona has a natural wonder which is absolutely unparalleled throughout the world. Leave it as it is," the President continued. "You cannot improve upon it. Do nothing to mar its grandeur. Keep it for your children, your children's children, and all who come after you, as the one great sight which every American should see."